Good morning. Should I do this part? Should I do this intro? Okay. Good morning,
What's
Renegade.
good?
I was going to say Renegade. See, now you got me in Renegade mode. Remix, remix morning show. Folks, thanks for joining us. I'm sure we have good numbers. I can't see none of that because my computer is broken. I'm using my child's computer. So y'all, please forgive me. I'm here with Burn It Down, Kim Brown, and our special guest coming in who woke up early. I can tell he woke up early for this and he's feeling it. He's always said one of the reasons he could never be a co-host on Remix Morning Show was the hours. So we really appreciate Two Black coming up, getting up early to talk about a really, really important matter. In case, give us an update. In the case we're talking about is the Pendleton 2. So Two Black, welcome so much for coming on and joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm like you said, it's early, but I'm here. I logged in earlier, man. What's going on? Did they take your electricity?
Well, I got my lights back, but my
I
kids basically, I think they broke my computer and they're not taking responsibility
thought
for it.
this was Cop City shit or something.
Yeah, but yeah. Well, I can't blame. I would like to blame the state.
Like I thought you were held hostage or something because it was like mad dark.
I moved the lights around. I thought it was a little better. I moved the lights around.
Yeah, what else? Anyway, Two Black, good morning, man. Thank you so much for making a point to be on here with us. So break it down. What's going on? You said, is it the Pendulum 2? What was the name of the political prisoners?
The Pendleton tool. I can. Do y'all have the story? If not, I can send that over real quick.
No, I have it. I pulled it up right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So some people on BPM know about the story, but I'll re-explain it as if no one's ever heard it. So about I don't know, maybe over a year ago, about a year ago, Black Miss Podcast, actually a year because it was March of last year. We interviewed, but when it down knows the Pendleton Two, that's Christopher Naeem Trotter and John Balagoon Cole. They're two political prisoners here in Indiana. So their story goes, I'm going to tell the short version first and we can get into some questions because this article in Truth Out gives a pretty extensive breakdown of what happened. It has testimony from people who were there as well as the gentlemen who were involved. But essentially, they were in a Pendleton prison at the time, was known as Indiana Reformatory Prison. This prison was, rampant with racism like most prisons, but this one was like actually ran, they didn't know at the time, but it came out later. It was actually ran by guards who were part of a white supremacist group known as the Sons of Light, which was a Klan splinter group. So there's a deposition from one of the guards who worked there named Michael Richardson. Talks about how the guards used to babysit his kids and the kids used to play with Klan robes. And they used to leave literature around the prison, letting people, like trying to recruit people into this group. So these are the people who ran it. And it wasn't just like low-level guards. This was lieutenants. This was like captains. This was all throughout the prison, different levels of leadership. So that's a little bit of backdrop. In this article talks about there were actually class action lawsuits, even by some of the guards who worked there, because they felt very endangered by this environment. Because people regularly were beat up by the prisons, particularly Black inmates were targeted by the guards. So on 1985, February 1st, there was an uprising started by the Sons of Light, or this Klan group, where on the maximum security unit, they went to quote unquote check on everybody, or like make sure folks didn't have weapons. So they were doing shakedowns. They did about 3 or 4 shakedowns this day. And actually the normal person who worked that unit wasn't there that day, interestingly enough. And that person usually kept, relative to prison, a decent, relationship with the prisoners. And that person wasn't there that day. So then they go in to shake up the inmate's cell. Particularly, they wanted to target one inmate by the name of Lincoln Love, aka Lokmar. So they go into his cell. Everybody's already stripped down the shower shoes and the t-shirt at this point. And they go in with billy clubs, tear gas, riot gear, and they just beat the shit out of him. Like just beat him damn near to death. So after they beat him, they hit him in his head. He's handcuffed while they're beating him, by the way. Beat him near to death. Then they drag him out of the cell to show everybody else, like what had happened. And they start telling the other prisoners, you're next. right? So the people who are on that unit shout out, like, "Yo, they trying to kill us down here! Like, go get help! Go get help!" So there was more than two gentlemen that came to help, but the two who led the people who eventually came was Balagoon and Naeem, or John Balagoon Cole and Christopher Naeem Trotter. So initially, Balagoon was called by this brother named Kevin Murphy. This is now they had dragged Lincoln Love at this point to the captain's office inside the prison. I think some folks said they had noticed he was being dragged across the yard. Again, this is after he's been beat, basically senseless at this point, right? And they took him behind the there's this curtain, and usually in the prison it was symbolized if you were behind this curtain, that's usually when they were beating someone up, right? Um, so Kevin Murphy sees this, goes to get Balagoon. Balagoon comes, doesn't have enough people, goes and gets reinforcements, comes back with Christopher Trotter. Initially, they peacefully approached him, was like, "Yo, y'all just need to stop beating this man," right? They didn't come at it violently, and then the guards attacked them. They got into a scuffle. So then, there's calls to, come get him or whatever. So they're still trying to find Lincoln Love. They never can actually get to where he's at. They find out later he was in the infirmary. But at this point, guards are chasing them with trucks, billy clubs, mace, and the order is to kill them. The order was already, I forgot to say, and this is testified to by the same guard, Michael Richardson, it was, quote, "kill the son of a bitch." That was the order for Lincoln Love. So they're trying to save this man's life, right? Like they intervene to save this man's life because the logical thought was that he was going to be killed if they didn't intervene, and I'm pretty sure it would have happened. But they had to take all the guards to chase them, so that took attention off Lincoln Love. And then in an attempt to, as the guards were trying to chase them and ultimately kill them, they took several days in the Pendleton too, and others took several hostages, went into Cell House J, took over the prison for about 15 hours, had a series of demands like more rec time, better food, more diverse guard staff, really just basic like amenities to make prison a somewhat livable situation. They weren't even asking for anything wild. Um, and then, it was about 15 hours. They called National Guard. They called journalists in from the Indianapolis Recorder and Indianapolis Star to be witnesses. They agreed that there would be no retaliation for this takeover. No one died, even though they did stab a few guards when they were fighting. No one died. And then they go to trial. It's an all-white jury. The jury doesn't get to hear any of the evidence, that's in their favor. So the fact that they're white supremacists, they don't get to hear that. They actually say that the beating of Lincoln Love was irrelevant, to their actions. They don't get to hear about the conditions of the prison, the lawsuits that even guards had against the prison, all the stuff that actually shapes why their state of mind was what it was to go defend what in legal terms is a defense of a third person. All those things were denied. Like the prosecutor would object, the judge would grant it. And you can read the transcript and it would just go over and over like that. So eventually they're sentenced to 142 years for Naeem Trotter, and then 84 years for Balagoon Cole, right? And then subsequently after that, Balagoon spent 32 years and 5 months in solitary confinement, and then Naeem spent about 20 years in solitary confinement, and they were moved throughout different maximum security units throughout the state, whether that was MCC or the SHU unit, and they had to engage in hunger strikes and lawsuits to even get some of those units shut down or at least reduced, from the level of depravity that was occurring inside it. So that's the story. I mean, y'all are open to ask questions, but there one more thing before I open it up. Like, I'm part of a defense committee for the Pendleton too. That's why I'm representing it. So we sent out a press release and help get that story published and truth out. I've been doing organizing work here in Indiana. We have a documentary about this incident or about this story that we're going to be putting out soon. We're going to actually be doing screenings with BAP, going to be doing screenings locally here with churches, and they'll be available online here soon. I'm not quite ready to announce all those details just yet. And then, we'll be doing political education and things of that nature around it. So.
One of the
That's a
things
fascinating
I find
story.
most amazing about the story, I shouldn't even say amazing, but one of the things that I find most troubling, when you mentioned the court's refusal to even hear about motivation, uh, the sort of motivation behind it, and they don't care. Obviously, and not only do they not care, they already understand that they're running a white supremacist prison system, and so therefore, how dare you even attack it, right? How dare you fight back against it? How dare you not do anything but allow us to kill you, treat you as a subhuman, put you in certain positions of fragility, where your life is continually and constantly in danger, and that's the psyche in which you live under. And if you dare stand up and fight back against it, what these folks did, this is the expected outcome. No hearing of your rationale, reasons, causes, your essential defense to what you did. You can't even present that because you have no right whatsoever except to get beat down and killed and to plead for mercy. And that's what they expect. That's what they expected out of these folks who decided to not only defend somebody, but fight back around creating better prison conditions and living conditions for themselves and their fellow inmates. So that's really for me part of it that just hits home and stuff like that. So it feels like uh, in terms of getting information out, the Defense Committee has done a good job of starting to get more information out. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like more people are starting to hear about this case? And how is that helping the folks inside, just in terms of encouragement? And then two, are there additional legal strategies that you see coming forward? Obviously, outside of the potentially, I'm assuming there's some more appeals, or has this been appealed out, and this is more about an avenue of getting either clemency from the governor? So what is the remaining legal strategy to try to address the issue for these two folks?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the question of more information getting out, yeah, I think it's getting there. I mean, we've been organizing on this for over almost a year now, and there's been some challenges to get it, particularly locally, to get more exposure. I mean, we've been in all the major outlets, but getting people to actually do something more than be like, oh my God, this is terrible. Like that's the real organizing challenge, is getting beyond just folks kind of like, perform sympathy. So that's what we're trying to figure out. So I think this documentary will be helpful because now we can invite people to a place to actually physically to a place to sit and watch it. And we have some screenings set up, and I think the documentary is pretty well done too. So it's also a quality film. As far as other things, as far as the legal side, yeah, I mean, in a situation like this, even though we say the Pendleton too, like each person has slightly different, legal situation. So like Naeem got hit with attempted murder plus solitary confinement and rioting, versus Balagoon didn't get the attempted murder charge. Naeem's, I think, exhausted more of his appeals than Balagoon, but right now he has what's called a post-conviction relief in. And then Balagoon's looking for a sentence modification because both of them have already served 40 years. So our position is, even if for whatever reason you think they deserve to be sentenced, they've clearly served more than enough time, right? So there's no reason. I mean, these men are older. Their health is failing. Like Balagoon had a tumor incident, just over the summer. So there's really no reason to keep them locked up. They're not threats to anyone. So again, this isn't particularly my politic as far as like that they're innocent or guilty. I think sometimes those things play in certain tropes. But even if people believe that they're guilty, there's no need for them to stay in prison. So that's kind of the legal track right now. But honestly, in Indiana, where I've heard even worse situations as far as like where the judge has even more evidence to overturn the case, like DNA evidence, and they still won't do it. So it's just going to require, actual organizing in the groundswell. There's no way this is going to happen based off of just, legal court things. Because lastly, in 2019, Naeem actually got his sentence vacated, right? And he's again, this person with 142 years. The judge who vacated it was was removed, and he was replaced by another judge, who then resentenced him to 122 years.
Hmm.
So, you know,
So Two Black, you talk about trying to move this issue beyond people being simply aware of it and the organizing work that goes into taking action. What are the actions that people who are now learning about the story of these two brothers, what can be done from the outside?
well, I think even in the story, and if you go to the Pendleton Two social media, literally it's just the Pendleton Two.
Can you
Um,
spell it? I keep hearing Pendleton. What can you spell it for me, please?
I'm not the greatest at spelling, but
Sorry.
Pendleton, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
Pendleton Two, and you can sign. There are petitions that we have, so you can sign a petition to the governor for clemency. There's one petition where you put your signature in, or there's one form which you put your signature in. It goes to like two different things. So there's a clemency to the governor, and then there's also advocacy for sentence modification. This helps because when a lawyer wants to go in and advocate for the client, if they have a bunch of signatures, that shows it at the very least that this person has support, and that goes a way in showing that this person isn't a complete deviant or whatever they're going to conceive it as. So that helps. We actually have collected a decent amount of signatures, and we're using some of that for the next phase, particularly with Balagoon as he tries to get sentence modification. So that's at the end of the story and the truth out. But again, so you can click on that if that's in the chat, and then you can also go to social media and click on that. Click on the link and then the link tree and go there, and you can sign that. And also, Black Myths will be doing an interview later this month with them. Some of the stuff that we couldn't fit in the documentary, with them talking about solitary confinement. So
Mhm.
there'll be other opportunities to do this. And anybody that follows me online, just hit me up and I can send you that form.
I had a curiosity question. Were these folks at the time, they were not like politicized, if I'm not mistaken, right? They weren't like overtly politicized people, and it was through this
They
process.
actually,
They
they
were. Go
actually
ahead. Yeah, yeah. Tell me. Yeah.
Yeah, they were already organizing before this occurred. So they had a group called the Black Dragons, and they were already organizing prisoners against the prison guards because of the brutality that they were facing. So often they would intervene if prisoners had beef with each other and try to like get them to settle that. And they were doing political education and things of that nature. So they already were up on a lot of the new African, literature even back then, which I think is what helped arm them to be ready for that moment, right? Like it wasn't random necessarily. They already had a tight bond. So, just quickly for people who know about political prisoners, we often hear about them. I'm sure most people watch this show know this difference, but like people think about political prisoners as just something on the outside. They get hit with some kind of charge because they were doing some type of, radical thing, and then they get sent to prison, punished particularly for their politics. But you can be in prison. George Jackson is an example of this, and you can be charged inside prison for your activity, and that's why we call them political prisoners, because again, no one even died in this incident, yet they both got de facto life sentences. So this is clearly a message beyond just, oh, they rioted a little bit. Like you're clearly trying to send a message for them to not for this type of activity to not happen ever again. And then within the Indiana prisons, regardless how people feel about the comparison, people look at this like Indiana's Attica. Like this is what I've been told from the inside.
Wow.
So it's very well, like it has there's a high reverence for this moment within the prison, even though a lot of people outside don't know it.
What is the status about the officers, the correctional officers and their white supremacist cell that they were operating? I'm assuming it's still happening. Did state officials pretend to even care about white supremacists running the prison as correctional officers?
They claimed at the time that the FBI and the state of Indiana both said they were going to do an investigation into the claims, because they were into like just the brutality of the prison because of this uprising and such. But we've never seen the investigation, and when I looked it up in newspaper archives, there was never any external release of the investigation. So we don't know what they found and if they even found or even tried to find anything, but it never was made public. But white supremacist guard gangs is actually fairly regular in prison. I don't think people are aware. Not just in Indiana, particularly in Indiana, but not just in Indiana. But the DOC doesn't tends to act like those things aren't happening. So nothing was ever found. I think one person did go to prison for violating Lincoln Love's civil rights. Lincoln Love, the person who was beat up, actually did get a settlement due to this. Even though he was still in prison for life. So there is evidence. There's even a lawsuit that I think Lieutenant Wicker, who was one of the main people who beat up Lincoln Love, and he was actually mad because they fired him and he was trying to get his job back. But in the lawsuit, you actually see a reference where the superintendent is like, we fired you because you went around and you beat Lincoln Love and you told people not to testify to it. You basically got people to lie about it. So this evidence is out here, but
so it's clear. Yeah, it's clear that he was beaten up by the guards.
Yeah,
so clear that they had to give a monetary settlement, but somehow the folks who tried to stop the beating from taking place, as opposed to being given some justice over the fact that they tried to stop guards from beating someone, they would rather that person have died and given these folks more of a sentence than that they would have intervened to try to stop this brutality, this potential killing from taking place or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious. Again, this is why we say this is political. Like, you don't want anyone. I think I posted online something like, and we say this in the documentary, when George Floyd was killed, and this isn't a judgment on anyone, but people watched and they filmed it and they responded to it afterwards he was killed. So this is equivalent to if somebody threw a brick at Derek Chauvin or something else while he was stepping on his neck and actually intervened. This is equivalent to that, right? Like, think about it, like they actually intervened. So we didn't have to like mourn the loss of a life. They actually jumped in and, they don't want people doing that, right? So they send a message that you're not supposed to jump in, right? You don't stop us when we're beating one of your people. Like, you can write a letter, you can protest it, but you can't actually defend them, in a very physical, material sense. Like, that state doesn't want anybody thinking like that. So they sent that message, very loud and clear in court. And that's a message they want to send to people outside of court. Like, you shouldn't be thinking like that even out here. So, imagine if more people intervened in these cases, like, those people would get the same punishment unless we had their backs.
Speaking of intervening, we have another interview coming up. I know you can't read, Kamal, so
that's the type of production skills we have here. I just asked you in the chat. You see Too Black? That's why we need you to come on in the morning time.
That's why I stay asleep.
That's why you stay asleep. Well, anyway, on that note, we want to thank you for coming on. And we're going to put up the information in the chat for folks to go to on how to find out more about the Pendleton 2, the article that was just written, how they can get involved. If they follow the link tree, they can find a whole bunch of new information. I think it's completely correct for you to end on that note of you can observe, you can document, you can watch, but that's the state wants to maintain its ability to use force. And anyone that tries to intervene and stop a life from being taken immediately gets branded either as a criminal or violent and the rest of it, and faces more charges because the state wants to reserve that right to use force of any kind whatsoever, even in their wrongdoing. They prefer to have that overwhelming right and to stop anybody and all of us. And so that's why we particularly have to defend these folks. They got involved, they stopped somebody potentially from getting killed, and their reward for that was basically life in prison.
Right.
So thank you so much for coming and joining us. Let's take a quick transition break. We'll be come right back with the Remix Morning Show